require a specific date to postpone it?
No.
Just till they're ready. Okay.
No. Craig. Second was Stephanie. So we have a motion and a second to postpone
Specific
this
date.
until the applicant comes back and requests it. Yeah, right. Okay. Any other discussion on this item? There being none, all those in favor of postponement, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 7 is hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from agricultural to commercial 2 district on an approximate 1.96 acre property located at 5880 West US Highway 190 Service Road, north of Interstate 14 and east of George Wilson. All right, Tina.
Thank you,
Now
Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir, it is. All right, so here is the location of the property. As you stated, it's north of Interstate 14, and it's just east of George Wilson. This is the site for the James Construction Company. This area was annexed into the city back in 2006. Recently, the applicant turned in an application for a building permit to remodel the building, which triggered this zoning change. So here's the current use. It's actually zoned agricultural. Again, that's part of our annexation practice. That and surrounding properties are agricultural. Across the street is a truck stop that was recently zoned from commercial to commercial highway, and everything else in that area is still ag. The future land use map has this as a commercial center appropriate for commercial type uses. That's a little bigger than neighborhood centers. Again, the applicant recently applied for an application. This is considered a non-conforming structure and use. Therefore, it triggered the application to get it to the appropriate compliant zoning district. So the applicant can be prepared in the future if he wants to do a future addition or expansion of that building. The proposed zoning change to commercial 2 would allow for the existing construction office use and outdoor storage. The lot exceeds the minimum requirement for commercial 2. Minimum requirement is 5,000 square foot, and this is approximately 2 acres. There are currently no city water or wastewater services in this area. They currently are served by an existing septic tank. Domestic water is provided by Dog Ridge. In the future, should they do another building or expansion, fire protection will be required for this property. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We received no letters of support or opposition for this property. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on May 16th and recommended approval of the zoning change. Staff concurs with their recommendation. With that, the use of the property shall conform to the commercial 2 district. In all respect, development of the lot should conform to all applicable design standards, including site design, development, landscaping, and tree protections. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
All right, this being a public hearing, we will now open the public hearing for this item. If you have any comments for or against this item, now is your time to speak. If anyone speaks, we try to limit to 3 minutes. Yeah, get the watch out.
Yeah, I won't take much time, guys.
Name and address for the official record.
Steve Wright, 5640 Kegley Place Lane, Temple. Mayor, City Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to represent this. We're representing PSC as their builder. It's a pretty simple zone change application that's triggered by the remodeling case as represented by staff. Be happy to answer any questions and ask for your support in the zone change.
Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you very
thank you.
much, guys. You
Yeah.
bet. Thank you.
All right. Oh, wait, still in public hearing. Any other public comments? All right. There being none, we will close the public hearing and open deliberation for the council. Any comments, questions, or motions?
Motion, we approve item 7 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the item. Now, do we have any discussion?
Looks like a great project, and glad Steve Wright is back in Belton and doing some work.
Yeah, welcome to Belton. All right, no other comments. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Looking forward to it. All right, item 8 is to consider a final plat for West Avenue O Professional Center comprising 1.456 acres located at 1261 West Highway 190 Service Road on Interstate 14 Frontage Road, east of Loop 121 and west of Canal Street. All right, Tina, back to you again.
Thank you, Mayor. As stated, this property is located right off of Interstate 14 on the south side of the road. And it is east of east of Loop 121 and west of Connell Street. Here's a zoomed in look. As you can see, this is currently undeveloped. Here is the proposed subdivision plat. They're proposing 1.04 acres. And again, the property is on commercial highway and the lot satisfies the zoning requirements. For water, this is in the city of Belton CCN. The applicant plans to connect to an existing 6-inch water line and extend the water line. This is a site plan of the property. So the blue line is the water line. Here is where the existing water line is, and they plan to extend it to the service, the building. And also they are required to extend to and through to the adjacent property so they can get services. So here is the line extending to the adjacent property. For wastewater, it's also the same kind of requirement. They have a long offsite improvement to do to get the wastewater line to the property, but they provide that to connect and also extend it to and through to the adjacent property for future development. And just a little more details on the proposed site plan. Here's the access off of Interstate 14 frontage road, and there's 2 access at the back off of West Avenue O. The building is an interior. There's parking on both sides of the property, and staff is currently looking at the site plan for this. It's very close to being approved. There's also sidewalk required off of Interstate 14, also sidewalk required off of West Avenue O because of the type of roadway they are. So just went over access. Interstate 14 again is a TxDOT facility, so they have received approval from TxDOT for the driveway and the proposed sidewalk improvements in that driveway in that area. West Avenue O is a major collector road, requires 80 feet of right of way. They currently have 120. For the width of the right of way ranges from 44 to 52 for requirements. They currently have 42, and staff did not think any perimeter street improvement should be required because it satisfies for that type of use. Sidewalk, a 6-foot sidewalk is required along Interstate 14 frontage road, and a 5-foot sidewalk is required along West Avenue O. The applicant plans to construct both. Drainage plans have been reviewed. There's minor changes that they have on the civil that the applicant is addressing. With that, the Planning and the Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on May 16th and recommended approval of the final plat. Staff concurs with their recommendation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
All right, this being a final plat, there is no public hearing, so any deliberation here on the council, questions, comments, motions?
The only question I had was the requirement for sidewalk on both sides, but the fact that Avenue O and the frontage road come to an end on both sides, and every property in between there really being frontage to both of them, is there a necessity to have a sidewalk on the frontage road side? I mean, we could definitely encourage pedestrian traffic on the Avenue O. I mean, it just seems safer, but I feel the double sidewalk is redundant in that stretch. I mean,
I understand what you're saying, but it is part of the subdivision requirements to try to get it on the type of roadway they are. And figure there's other chances for improvements off of Avenue O. I see that being more used because of the adjacency to the residential area as a walk path. TxDOT's a major highway. We feel like there should be some kind of amenities provided for pedestrian traffic off of TxDOT's roadway.
And there's quite a bit of undeveloped property along I-14 as well, so we'd certainly be looking at that application of this standard elsewhere to try to achieve that pedestrian access.
yeah, and I'm really only calling in point just the fact that the frontage road splits into Avenue O west of 121, and then the same 2 roads come back together, between the church and Nami's. I mean, I'm just thinking one sidewalk and you just get traffic off of as much of highway frontage as possible, as we've seen what's happened before. Not that I'm saying it has to be that way, just questioning the necessity for the double sidewalk.
Other questions or comments? Motion?
I'll make a motion. Good points, although I want to acknowledge that and maybe for future discussion as this area develops. But I would like to make a motion to approve agenda item 8 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this final plat. Any other discussion? Yeah, a couple of comments. One is as this develops, there is a lot of multifamily and in the area. So I anticipate that we will need that. But Daniel brings up a good point. We probably need to look at kind of a pedestrian thoroughfare plan on that side because we're getting a lot of density and there's also a lot of traffic there. So we probably do need to put that somewhere and think about that proactively. Also, they have access off of 14. TxDOT allowed that. Does that prohibit the other properties from getting that access? Or is there cross access easement potential for this? Like if somebody builds next to them, are they not going to get access onto 14?
It's reviewed by TxDOT. It also depends on what type of proposal that they're planning on doing
Okay.
at the adjacent property. That would be reviewed by TxDOT. For cross access, I could see that happening on 14, but it is on the access they're asking for is again, which property is closest
Could you
to it.
just put the picture of their
Sure.
kind of where you had the plumbing or the water and sewer?
There you
It's like
go.
the site plan shows it on the property line on the
It
west.
does show it on the property line, but again, the developer that wanted to develop just on the west side of that could petition for that joint access if that was something that was required for TxDOT. Again, there's also access off of West Avenue O, so staff thought
Yeah, that's
There's-
that's a really good point. I think if we didn't have O, we would really need to think about how do we link these because that's a pretty thin strip for a
Correct.
pretty long area. And the TxDOT probably isn't thinking long term. They're just saying, hey, this distance from here to here is fine. And then you come into the next one and you potentially block them. So again, something we might want to consider as we see expansion and development.
And to really add to the sidewalk point, that sidewalk's not really on the frontage. It's back on the property line.
it's closer to property line.
Yeah, and then it shows a sidewalk like there's gonna be a future sidewalk on the frontage as well, the way it curls out.
It will not be, because again, TxDOT has to review it and they probably ever proven the location of that, say, get it away from there in case we need to expand that right away in the future, put it on your property line. So that's closer to their property line than in the TxDOT right away to meet that requirement. Because again, TxDOT need to make sure there's adequate room should they need to do any kind of future improvements.
We do have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. Item 9, receive a presentation on the annual tax appraisal process and results for the city of Belton from Billy White, chief appraiser. Number one target this week seems like. I think I've got 14 emails on protests. So welcome. Do we have police? Yes, we do. Okay, yes, we're good. We're good. Welcome to Belton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members, for having me out. I appreciate y'all letting us come out and present to you, show us what you've been paying for as part of the contract with the appraisal district in the city. Obviously, you guys pay for the services that we provide you and to let you know what the values are doing in the city and such. I presented to the CFO and city manager, Sam Listy, a couple of weeks ago, and they wanted to come out and present some of this information to you also. So please, if you have any questions, I've given this presentation a few times now. So if you have any questions, stop me and we can go into that. So they said I had about 1 hour to present. No.
Good luck
So-
with that.
So just go over a couple of basics. As y'all know, our district is comprises the whole county. We have 181,000 parcels. We're about 17th largest in the state. So obviously you guys know too that Belton and Temple Clean are growing, but we are definitely underestimated as to how big they think our county is and how fast it's growing. We have 52 employees currently. We're probably petitioning for 4 more employees in our budget for next year, up to 56 employees with all the growth and the work that comes along with the growth in our appraisal processes. We have a board of directors that's appointed by each of the cities and the counties, and then all the smaller entities also appoint them. Your appointee is Mr. Joe Shepherd. He's there in the background, making sure I do everything well tonight. But he's appointed by you guys and Belton ISD jointly. And of course, those are the rest of the board members. So if you have emails and such, you can contact them and they can direct, or you can contact me also. So Some of the basics, what some people misunderstand is that the appraisal district, our job is to follow what the tax code says and what the government code has put out for us. There's not a lot of leeway when it comes to what I can and can't do. It really is pretty basic. It says we have to go to what we think market value is each year. Obviously, if our job would be a lot easier if we could leave the values the same and then less people would protest, that would make my job a lot easier and such. But the tax codes for now says January 1st, we have to be what we think market value is based on the information that's out there. Some of the services we provide, obviously we do appraisals, we do the tax rate calculations too. We are one of the largest appraisal districts in the state that still do tax collections and the tax rate calculations. My deputy over there, she does all the calculations. She's busy all August doing all the these collections or the calculations for the tax rates. But we are one of the largest ones that still perform that. Most of the time that's performed by the tax assessor, but we are still contracted by the city, the county, and all the other cities and ISDs to do your tax rate calculations and your collections also. So when other appraisal districts throughout the state get a little bit of time off the rest of the year, we start collecting taxes on the other side of it. So we stay busy all year long and keep the target up all year long for us. So, so how the appraisal district works, obviously you guys know y'all elect the board of directors is appointed by you guys as the city council. Y'all come to do appointments every 2 years. It's a 2-year appointment. And I believe Mr. Shepherd's appointment will be up this year, and then we'll be appointing again at the end of this year for the board of directors. This just shows a basic property tax cycle of where we're at and how our appraisal calendar works. Our calendar really starts in July or August after we get done certifying our appraisal roll. That's when we start over and go out to the field and measure all the new houses that there are. And then we come back, have a very short window to look at all that information that we gathered, look at all the sales information that happened, to hurry up and quickly send out appraisal notices and get them out to send out the invites to everybody to come back and tell us how happy they are with the values that we've sent out, or any issues that they found. And then, of course, soon after we certify the tax roll on July 20th and give over all the information to the cities and you guys, so y'all can determine your tax rates. That's when we send out the tax bills after you guys giving your tax rates to us. Homestead exemptions, I think this was just in here because it just has some basic information. Obviously, homestead exemptions have changed this last year. Legislation changes so you can actually live in the property. Throughout the middle of the year, and you actually get the homestead exemption before the January 1st. One difference or one misconception is when it comes to the homestead cap, which has come into play a lot this last year or two because of values going up so much, is the homestead cap doesn't take place until you have lived in the house for at least a full January, until you're there on a January 1st. So obviously, if you move in July, it won't cap until that next prior year. So somebody that moved in last year, they won't receive a homestead cap until 2024. And the other basics it provides is obviously right now it's $40,000. Obviously, there's some bills out there that they got a lot of different changes proposed between the Senate and the House, and I don't think they've decided on who's doing what or how they're going to come about that yet. But that's to be seen.
So homestead cap versus homestead exemption, if you could.
So the homestead exemption provides two things. It provides a homestead cap, which is if your house goes up, your property goes up more than 10%, then you will only be taxed or assessed at that 10% value. Even if it goes up, 40%, you'll only be taxed at 10% that year. The other thing it provides is for school districts, it provides a $40,000 exemption. So whatever that 10% amount was, you take $40,000 off that, and that's what you multiply your school tax rate by. Like I said, one of the things they've opted right now is, I think the last bill sent back to the Senate was they're saying up to $110,000 and for seniors, $100,000 for non-seniors. So that's one of the things that is out there right now. And they said $70,000. Who knows what it's going to end up at? But those are the two things. You get an amount off your tax bill for the school districts and any other entities that have an optional exemption. Does the city of Belton have an exemption amount? You all have an exemption? I can't keep track of which ones do. So some cities do have an exemption amount. Also, they give a optional dollar amount or percentage amount. And then, of course, you have a homestead cap, which really comes into play when the market's moving the way it is currently.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. This is just a mailer we sent out to all of our property owners this year that have a homestead, trying to explain the basics of it. And obviously, it sounds simple to me because I've explained it a lot and I work in it every day, but trying to help to explain to everyone how it works and the incentives it provides. Obviously, I want to come tell you what kind of job we're doing. I know right now you said you get a lot of emails right now, and we get a lot of people that come in and not everybody is happy when they come in. Nobody's happy to pay taxes. I don't like to pay taxes. Nobody does, but it's a necessary evil. And value, we're the one people that can make a definite change to your property taxes in the end. But our customer service, we give these out to everybody that comes in the door to pay their taxes, to talk to our appraisers. And most of the time, it's more of an educational point, explaining how we did things, why we did things, and what information we used to get there. So we pride ourselves on all these questions that we ask, and we give out these surveys to everyone, not just the ones that are happy or angry. We give them out right when they first meet them. We tell them, hand it to them before they even walk to their desk. And out of all these surveys we received last year, the 2022, you can see 97, 98% of them thought we did excellent or good service. So obviously that isn't the ones that are always telling us about what all is going on in their property, and we can't make everybody 100% happy, but obviously the majority of them were satisfied in receiving a product that nobody wants to buy. So just so some of the projects that we performed this last year. These are a couple of projects that by the budget that you pay into that we're able to do to provide better services for the city and the school districts and the county and such. Sketch check is something we do every year annually. We have a company that flies aerials. And every year annually, we do a project called Sketch Check where they goes in or it's Change Finder. I'm sorry, Change Finder we do annually. And it says whether or not that property has changed from last photo to this photo. Did something change out there? Did they build another building out there? So even though we get permits and we get everything else, not everybody pulls permits, and my appraisers aren't perfect. They don't catch every single thing that's out there or see everything. So this project will alert us to anything that's changed on the properties. And this is how we try and keep our appraisal rolls accurate and fair to everybody, to keep them accurate and have all the right information. Sketch Check is another project that we did this last 2 years. It took a lot of work. It took over 7,000 man hours to complete that. One of the reasons we were a little later getting our notices out this year, we were finishing this project. But it took our drawing that we had in our system and put it on top of our aerials from 2 years ago and said, does it match it? So it would have found if we had missed a property or a building for the last 20 years, it found everything that's ever been missing from the property tax roll. And as you can see, these projects are important to show that we're returning money back to the cities and the school districts, and you're getting what you're paying for. But it's more important for us to have a fair and accurate appraisal. That's really what we're after. But as you can see here, we had in Sketch Check 44,000 accounts, cost us $240,000 approximately with our manpower, and we returned $124 million at a 2.5% tax rate. That's $3.1 million on the first year that it returned it. So quite a big return rate. And of course, these things are on the roll every single year thereafter. We do that also with our pool finder. We find pools every year to make sure that we're accurate. It's not that we're trying to find everybody's pool and get everything on there, but if somebody in your neighborhood has a pool and they sell their house and it sells for way more than everybody else's, you don't want us to overinflate the rest of the neighborhood because we don't realize there's a pool on it. So we want to make sure it's accurate and reflects if there was a difference there. So all these things, you can see how much they added in taxes, and it's just 1 year. And of course, those improvements are on the appraisal roll from here thereafter. So how are we graded? Every year we are what I call is the most audited government entity in the state. We get audited by taxpayers and property owners when they come in and show us their values each year. We get audited by a auditor for our financials. We get audited by an auditor for our operations. And then we get audited by the state comptroller's office every year. And in 1 year, we get audited for our map review, which is what I'm showing you here, the methods and resistance. They say, are we doing our job? Have we provided all the information we're supposed to based on the tax code? Have we done anything by the deadlines? Are operating procedures correct and such? And based on here, we don't always receive 100%, but this last year, when we did our map review, we received a 100% rating that all of our questions were answered, and we're doing everything according to tax code, according to the comptroller's audit of us. Every other year, which is the odd years, which will be this year, we do a property value study. The last one we did was in 2021. And what they do is they go in after we get done setting out all these values, they come back and randomly select properties to determine if we appraise the properties, the whole school districts at where they should be. If we don't appraise them to a certain point where it should be, or what they think it should be, between 95 and 105%, we could possibly fail that school district. And if you fail it enough or fail it bad enough, like get it so low that it's so far out of range, the school districts have an opportunity or a possibility of actually losing funding. We had failed Temple ISD 2 years prior to that. And then Temple ISD we failed in 21, but we did appeal that. And we go to the state just like we're a property owner and tell them they're wrong as to how they appraise it. They shouldn't appraise that high. And we actually won the Temple one. We don't always win the property value studies, but we did actually win that one. So in 21, we passed all school districts where we need to be, where the values were at. And then again, we'll get a study this year with all the values we sent out this year, we won't find that until January 31st next year is when we'll receive the results. Each year, and you can even look at the statistics, but each year the property value study, the comptroller tells more and more school districts than they did the year before. So it's one of those things you have to keep with what the market's doing in hopes that the property value study doesn't come in and fail us and possibly pull funding from the schools. I think for Temple ISD, it was upwards of, I think, $22 million is the possibility of funding they would have lost if we hadn't won that appeal. So it's a big deal for schools and has a big impact on their funding and their budget, obviously, too. All that aside, so our budget, we have set our budget out and talked to the city manager and CFO about what all we're requesting in our budget this year. This just shows you as our county grows, every time somebody does a plat or subdivision gets approved, we have to draw that lot out in GIS. We have to take care of that deed that gets exempted. All those subdivisions with hundreds of houses, we have to take care of each of those. As houses sell, we take care of those, the exemptions that come. And then, of course, we collect more taxes. Every new house that's put down, we measure each of those. We measure 3,500 new houses this year, the most we've measured in quite a while, or since I've been the chief appraiser. And then, of course, as the market's moving and changing, obviously causes more protests. So we're dealing with that. So this is just showing you just from a 1 year's change, how much labor has changed at the appraisal district. And this just kind of shows you where we sit in comparison to other appraisal districts of similar size and how our budget there as compared to other appraisal districts are. In 2024, that's compared to these other appraisal districts on their 2021 budget. That's the most recent information I can receive from them. And what's important to know also, these are all similar size, but only the black ones there, which is Lubbock and Midland. I don't know why Oasis came black. That must have changed when it came over, but only Lubbock and Midland are the only other appraisal districts here that actually do collections. These other appraisal districts that we're sitting in about the same costs, they're providing about the same services for the same cost, don't do any collections at all, don't take any taxes, do any tax rate calculations, have to have a whole staff to collect money throughout the fall. And that just shows how we're at for how our budget has been for the past few years. We've been providing about the same services for the less dollar per budget for the last few years, and we're asking to increase it some this year because of adding employees for our labor is our big need for increase. This just shows you a level of protest. Obviously, what I put on here to show sometimes is to our months of inventory, which obviously is showing really what the health of the real estate market is. And as you can see, as their months of inventory went down, our market started just going crazy in 2017, 18. I think we were a little slow behind to catch up to what was going on. But as we started raising values and the market started taking off at the same time, you can see that's where our protest levels are at. This last year, we were at 24,000 protests and walk-in increase, what we had total. And I expect we'll probably be somewhere around that, if not more this year. This just shows what others are saying about the market. And obviously we hear what's going on in the news and we hear about interest rates changing and hear about house prices not selling. But from the majority of what we saw, at least compared to last year to the beginning of this year, and it may change next year, but what we saw is that house prices had increased from what we had appraised them at last year. And even though less houses were selling, you can see even on that far top right corner, the average selling price last year still was well above where it was the year before. The months of inventory, it came up. That's the one in the bottom right corner there. It came up to 2.1 months, but a stable market is about 6 months. That's where it's not a buyer, not a seller's market. You can see we haven't been there since 2014 and 2015 is the last time we were anywhere near a stable market. So it's coming up and slowing down, but we still saw prices were increasing, at least from what we had appraised them at last January. So this just talks about some of the preliminary data that we released to you guys to help y'all start looking at your budget and what kind of money you'll be dealing with this year. The total market value that we went to this year was 3.11 billion in the city of Belton from 2.65. So a pretty big jump, not as big as it was last year, but a very large jump as to what the market value changed to. And as you can see, a lot of that was obviously in residential property, commercial property changed also, but the residential home value just over the last few years, you can see has just changed very rapidly. And that's just what this market has been doing here in the county. You can see up to $277,000, not as big of a jump as it was last year, but still a really big jump as to what's going on and what the prices are doing and driving this market. This just shows you how you compare to other cities. Your third there from the left, that's the city of Belton, TBE. This shows you how many new houses were built inside the city and what the average price of that house that was built. So you can see 275 new homes were built in the city of Belton. And the average price of those value is $328,000. The kind of product that was being put into the city this last year. This shows you, I showed you what was on the market value, and this kind of shows you what's taken off of the market value. One of the parts of the market that's taken off the market value, how much is exempted off the tax roll each year, which a lot of it is based off of the exemptions, a lot of the total exemptions from charities. And you guys have a lot of government buildings in the city of Belton, obviously, that since the county seat is here and our building and others are here, those are exemptions, or they're totally exempt. But then also you have your disabled veteran homesteads that are 100% exempt. And each year, even if you get the same amount of exemptions, that does not change. If the values of those properties change, you're going to change how much you're exempted, because those were never on the tax roll before. And now they're worth more, but they're still not on the tax roll, and it's more money that's being exempted off. So you can see that's increased. Yours is not as dramatic as what some of the other cities I presented to, but it's still quite a bit of change as how much is lost off the tax roll due to exemptions. And last but not least, this is your change in your taxable values. This is the amount you'll be dealing with when you guys start setting your budget and your tax rates. This is the preliminary. What we send out at the end of April is what we think the preliminary estimate is. You can see to the far right, those three graphs, those are the dark blue one is the total taxable value that we've added to the tax roll this year, that 0.39 billion. The light blue and the red make up that dark blue number. The red is your new value. So that doesn't affect it by your no new revenue tax rate isn't affected by that new value. And then the 0.28 is all the existing properties, how much they went up. So those will be what will be going into your no new revenue tax rate. All that to be said, that 1.8 to $2.2 billion preliminary estimate to about 21% in taxable change is what we're estimating it to be after we're done and certified in July. So I hope I didn't take a full hour, but do you have any questions?
Yeah, Billy, thanks for being a efficient conduit in collection and assessment of our taxes. Just curious, I've had a lot of questions. It seems like this past year, the most recent appraisal value, property had a big jump, a real property for a residence versus the building itself. Any comment to that? Or, some people have said, I don't think I can sell my land for X, but we're lagging behind in the property value.
Well, we're always lagging behind because we're following sales from a year behind. So we're always behind at least that much.
Unless the market goes the other way.
Well, unless the market, we're still lagging behind. Just we're lagging behind on what the market's doing. Yes. Yeah. If the market goes down, we're going to follow it. I'd be happy with the market, not happy in that way, but our protests and our levels.
No, I understood.
But no, the land values, we adjust them each year, but we can't look at every single. We do look at almost every single house, every single neighborhood every year, but looking at every single piece of land, sometimes we concentrate in areas that we see a lot of activity happening and a lot of sales happening. We only have so many appraisers that can go and dig into every single sales each year. So it may have been catching up and it may have been just as last year. And we receive almost, Texas is a non-disclosure state, but we do have sources where we receive almost 100% of the residential property sales. I would say we receive almost all of them. But when it comes to commercial and land sales, those are hard to come by.
I'm referring to land for a personal residence.
The lot.
Oh, the lot just underneath the lot.
Yeah.
So what we do on those? Yeah. So we don't really get many vacant land sales in a neighborhood that's fully built out. But one of the appraisal principles is allocation and abstraction. And typically we like to be around 25% of the total value of the land value. So when we start pushing the value of the whole property up, then that percentage goes way down in the land value. And we know that based on just knowledge of how much vacant lots are selling neighbors next door, that this lot isn't worth $15,000 anymore in a $400,000 house.
Oh, that helps a lot. 25%.
So 25% is what we're shooting for. And you can see in a lot of ours, we're still probably behind on some of those. So each year we go and reevaluate that when our land appraisers are reevaluating their land neighborhoods for each of those before the residential appraiser comes in and values the house. They determine are the allocations, abstractions right based off the new sales coming out. So 25% is what we generally shoot for. But I would imagine a lot of them are still well under that. So
that helps a lot. Thank you.
Quick question on new property, new value versus new appraised value. So those two things obviously affect our no new revenue rate. Could you talk a little bit about what's driving for the city of Belton? Because what was the number? 100? About half of that is new, improved, right? So,
Well, it's about, it looks like about a third of the total new taxable value that you received this year.
so do you have an
Well,
idea like?
I didn't
what
pull
is
them
that?
all up, but if I had to guess, I would say the majority of it is all your new houses. That's where the majority of new value is, from new houses.
New houses or apartments or something? Or-
Apartment complex, anything that's brand new, it gets, the first year it's on, it's coded as new value, and it doesn't go into a cap, or if a homestead cap is there, it counts as new value. So a lot of the new houses you had, 275 times 328, whatever that number is, that some of those are going to be exempt, but that alone is a lot of new value, just that alone. So make up the math, I didn't do it. And then, of course, if y'all have any new apartment complexes coming in,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
not,
it's
at
not
least to
even-
my knowledge, not a lot of brand new commercial other than apartment complexes, but apartment complexes, larger apartment complexes, usually $10 to $30 million
Yeah.
value. So they're pretty big values.
So that's
once they come
nine,
online.
roughly $90 million based on that math. So that's a big portion of that, just brand new houses.
That's where a lot of the value is, at least for the city of Belton, a lot of the new value is coming.
Any other questions?
You said that you get 100% of the sales information from property that's sold. How do you get that information?
Well, I think we get close to 100%, but we use sources. There's a source called TransUnion where we are allowed to legally purchase that information. I think the Travis Appraisal District years ago set up a contract for them to sell it to all appraisal districts throughout the state. So TransUnion sells us all their data. And that's where we get, I'd say, the majority of our residential sales data. Commercial and land sales data, we subscribe to other sources such as LoopNet, CoStar, and other sources, the same things that commercial brokers use for information.
And then can you talk a little bit about how the Texas Comptroller's Office grades your work and the accuracy of your work? How do they come up with their calculations to say you're either within or without that 5% margin of error either way?
Well, they do it differently. We value each neighborhood and we look how each neighborhood has moved or changed from last year. What they will go in and do, and they set up, first of all, they break it into, as you can see here, by state code. So single family and multifamily, they break it up by single family first. And then they do what they call stratums. They'll say stratum 1 is going to be 50,000 to 150,000. I don't know how they get their stratums, but they have a stratum. And then they pick at that 50 to 150,000. If there's 700 houses in it and there's 50 cells in there, they'll pull 2 of those cells out and say, these are the 2 cells we're going to use. Randomly pick 2 cells. Once they pick those 2 cells, they say, okay, you're at, this one sold for $100,000 and you're at 95,000. So you're at 95%. This one sold 100,000, you're at $80,000. You're at 80%. So our median ratio would be at probably like 87%. So then we take 87% and they applied it back to all those 700 houses to figure out that's what the value of those 700 houses are. Then they do that for the next stratum, the next stratum. So those couple random properties they pick can make or break our whole study. And then in areas like especially smaller school districts where there's not a lot of sales activity, or commercial properties where there's not a lot of sales information, they will actually go in and pick 2 random properties and do their own appraisal on them. They'll actually go appraise. They think this property is worth this based on their information. And then they say, if we appraise this at $150,000 and you got it at 100, they treat that like it's a sales price. So they say that's what your ratio is based off that. And they use that as a sell and put that back into the system. So you can do really good on single family in the low end, but if you're really bad in the high end, that's a lot. They add all that value up at the end. If you're at that 700 houses, you're at 87%. Whatever the value of those 700 houses is times 87%. That's the value for that stratum to the next stratum. Then they add up all the stratums at the end, their value and our value. And if that value comes to 95 to 105, you're in. If it's at 94.99%, you're out.
And so when you talk about going to fight the grade book on Temple ISD, for example, then you can say, hey, the 2 that you picked aren't.
We tell them this isn't a good example. Here's why you shouldn't have used this cell. Or if they appraised it, usually with the cells, there's not as much to fight on a cell, right? It is what it is. And when we appraise them, we look at the whole neighborhood and some are going to fall a little above, some are going to fall a little below. We're trying to get to the middle. And it seems like randomly they pick the ones that are low is how they pick them sometimes. But then when they appraise a property, use that as a sell, there's a lot more we can argue with. Well, we don't think you should have appraised this one as a class this, or if it was an apartment complex, you should have used an $18 rent rate rather than a $20 rent rate, because we can show you right here. Here's their rent roll. They showed it to us. There's no way this is right. So we have to go in and pick apart every single piece of their argument and spend hours with our attorneys going in and out of the comptrollers trying to get them to come back to our number.
And then on the residential sales that they're picking at random, are they getting their data on that? Are they buying from TransUnion also?
They buy from TransUnion and they have I think they have MLS in some areas of the state. I don't know if they have it for our area, but they do have it for other areas. They also use They also will use sales all the way into further into the year than we will. Obviously, we don't even have information for even March because we're trying to have our values done by the beginning of March. So they're using sales all the way into the year. And that's what they say is that is to prevent us from pushing a certain property just to sell up to a certain value to push it up there, what they call sales chasing. So they'll pick ones that they know we had no knowledge of it even selling to see how we praise that one. So it kind of puts us on an unfair advantage. They're using different information than we even had available to us.
Sure. And my last question, do you know what the total lost revenue for all the municipalities and districts, school districts and different taxing entities in the county, what the total lost revenue from disabled vet exemptions is? You happen to know that? I know that's a
Revenue,
specific question.
well, I do have the county's presentation with me, but it would just be just for the county. It wouldn't be for you guys as an.
You don't know like what.
I don't have them all added together. We can get that, but I don't have them all added together. No, I've never actually been asked that question, but yeah, we could tell you how much is lost to. It wouldn't be revenue, we tell you how much value is lost, and then it depends on each year the tax rate changes, but we can get that for you.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other?
Great information. I appreciate some of those links in your packet, and real interesting to see the top 10 taxpayers for Belton, the city, and other surrounding areas. And I think out of the top 10, 6 of ours were apartment complexes. And not a whole lot of
Makes sense.
industrial. So yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right. No action on this, so again, appreciate it. Still time to file your protests. Public service announcement. Right in the middle. All right, item 10, consider awarding of a bid and authorizing the city manager to execute the construction contract for College 13th Avenue improvements and annual street maintenance project, and any change orders associated with the contract not to exceed the amount authorized under state law. Mr. Matt Bates.
Mayor, council, thank you very much for letting me speak to you guys tonight. Got several projects to present to you. I think we're all pretty excited to work our way through there. Do have a couple of folks with me from the street maintenance side, but I have Assistant Director Scott Huddy back there, Fred Robles, our city inspector, and of course, John, our engineer back there as well. But there's a lot of stuff happening in May, and I want to save you one less proclamation, Mayor, but it is National Public Works Week. And so this year's theme is connecting the world through public works. And so I would like enjoying you guys to connect with us if you're around tomorrow at 7:30 for some breakfast tacos. Me, Sam, and Gene will be ready to go on that. So anyway, just wanted to let you all know that and appreciate those guys in the yes. Okay, so first
Taking
one.
orders?
Sorry, what's that?
You taking orders?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm ready to go. So the first one is probably one that you've heard a little bit about and probably again, excited to see come forward. This is 13th Avenue and College Street. Let's lead with that one. College Street and 13th Avenue reconstruction. So this is the kind of boundary area you can see. It's really from the railroad tracks there north of UMHB, and it kind of circles up. That top left there, we have Continental Field. So nice little baseball park that we have up there, but it brings you all the way around and then all the way out to Taco Town that just opened up a little while ago. And so this area, I'm just going to run you through a few pictures. Dubbed possibly the worst road in Belton. So, and it is pretty bad. And so there's a few pictures kind of going along College Street. And then we're kind of looking down 13th and obviously back at you right there. So some project details, and this is not College Street but it's above it. I'm aware of that. I'll explain why here in a second, but we have 14-foot of roadway reconstruction, curb and gutter throughout that reconstruction. So you saw those pictures. It's just kind of falling apart off the edges. All the neighbors that are tied on that neighborhood that are tied into that crumbling road, brand new driveways. So everyone, I think we're going to leave a good taste in everyone's mouth. I hope it's going to be really good. And the reason why I show you Burnett was we did the same thing over here, right? When we did the McFarland, I know Tina, sorry, here with the trees, they were in the road. It was a mess, but we had, but getting the curb, it just does wonders for the street curb appeal, all that kind of stuff. So we're excited about that. So that's College and 13th. Any quick questions on, or not quick questions, any questions, sorry, on College and 13th and what that project entails? It's really a road-based project. It's a full reconstruction everywhere. There's no utilities attached to this. or storm sewer. There's a little bit of drainage that John worked through us on, but that's it.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing this. And I can't tell you how many times I've complained to Sam about why we can't get that done. And we never had the money. So God bless you and Godspeed on getting this done because
Yeah.
it's about 3 decades overdue.
That's great.
Amen.
Yes, absolutely.
My question is actually on the picture on the left there.
Yes.
I've noticed the street width barely or maybe doesn't match the width of the actual crossing. Is there I mean, it's pretty narrow across the crossing.
Yeah.
Are we building the street wider in hopes that maybe one day?
No, we're gonna take, it's probably gonna taper down here to that street section with curb and gutter. We're gonna get us, you can imagine dealing with the railroad is
Like doing.
we're trying to avoid having to go, because that will just set this back another 30 years. So we are trying to get as close as we can to those tracks, and I've actually had some dialogue in some other areas of town that I think we could really try to get us up to those tracks, but we can't really do much on. I think you're not asking about the tracks itself. I think you're just talking about the width of the roadway.
Well, I mean, specifically the tracks itself at
Yeah.
some point down the future, but because I noticed on the university side, it's wide. They don't really have curb and gutter up to the crossing and it just tapers down. I was just wondering if we were gonna do the same to where hopefully in the future, they decide to widen that crossing and our curb and gutters already there. We don't have to rip anything out.
We may not be fully there in what you're kind of envisioning that, but we're gonna get as close as we can, because I think we feel the same way. We want to get to the point where that railroad and when that crossing does come up and maybe this is a good catalyst for that crossing to get going, builds momentum. So yeah, but that kind of little edges right as they go over, I've seen a couple of students, I think PD's fished them out where they kind of roll off the edge. Maybe they're right on. So I think it's important that we get that kind of done and squared away with it. So.
Must not have had enough speed.
Yeah, they get a little jump there. Any other questions on College and 13th? Or I want to show you the reconstruction side first, because now we're going to go into the maintenance side, and I'm sure there's a lot of roads you're like, man, that's the worst road ever, and some of those are they just reconstruction roads, right? I can think of 4th Avenue by the old school or the administration building over there. See, that's the superintendent over there nodding his head. That's a really bad road. I wish we could mill and overlay it, but we need to reconstruct that, and it's coming. We're going to come there next on that. So anyway, so that's us. We're going to maintenance now. So this is, by the way, taken from very early this morning. First thing,
Isn't that pretty?
if you haven't heard the news, the
Yeah.
Park Avenue is paved fully.
Nice.
So yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. They needed 4 days of dry weather to asphalt the thing, and it averaged, I think, 2.3 days in between rains, and it was a mess. So that's there. I gave you all this map. This is what we call the base bid for it. So you'll have seen these kind of base bids before. It's just kind of the larger quantity of asphalt that we essentially are telling a contractor, we want this much asphalt and we're going to spread it out in various places. We give them a map. And they kind of go off that. This year's base bid is 60,000 square yards. The most we've ever done was like 42 back in 2021. I know this being something the goal of council and management to kind of get. So we're at 60,000 square yards. It was our base bid of this year. And I do have those streets broken down just in case one of you all I'd like to see that. I'm going to hand out. So I'm just going to take you through a few streets, not all of them, just a few streets. 1st Avenue, Kim, we're going to take care of you over there. Also, we're going to do behind them. So where the depot is down to East Street, that's going to get done. Penelope Street from 2nd up to 6th Avenue is a road that's going to get mill and overlaid. 3rd Avenue, which is close to the admin office over there, that fog seal is kind of evaporating. We've had several different methods of how we've treated roads over the years. And so we're just trying to catch up with a lot of it. And some of these pictures maybe don't do it quite as justice as some of the repairs need. Blair Street behind the county offices there, a lot of crack sealing that we're constantly over there with. This is Avenue E, Avenue H, South Beale Street, West Avenue J. This is kind of a Jeff Hamilton Park is all the way at the end there. Tremont Street, so over kind of by the Public Works neck of the woods. And then we have one for Mystic Mountain Lane as well. So we got that as well. We did with this package that we put out, put out quite an aggressive adult section. So, so basically ad alternates that we wanted them to price us to see what we would come back at. We did 17, which was quite a lot. John will tell you. So here's the adults. We're at Dunn's Canyon, north of State Drive. That's the Heritage Park clubhouse parking lot. If you remember, we did the 24th Avenue extension. And again, these are all ones we were just putting kind of feelers out there. We have Forest Drive or actually Elm Drive there behind Subway, PD parking lot. And we got several areas that are around the Standpipe Park, kind of that neighborhood, you know, it's an older neighborhood that really could use some work done there. I'll just cycle you through a few of those adults. This is Elm Drive.
Ju-
Go ahead. Yes.
I'm
sir.
sorry.
Sir.
My parents used to live on Elm Drive, and the drainage, as you can see, is a real problem.
Yeah.
Is anything that can be done to address some of that issue when you're redoing that?
We'll look into it. We haven't initially thought, we just kind of plugged them with a mill and overlay. It is the subgrade is in actually quite good condition. It's been patched a whole heck of a lot. So it actually will look nice when we overlay it. But yes, I know what you mean. That's kind of at the bottom end of that.
Yes.
Kind of almost to the right where that mailbox is kind of where a lot of that really runs through there. So.
Thank you. Just
State Drive, north of State Drive. We did south of State Drive last year. So this is kind of matching up an older road there.
And Matt, some of the pictures with the no curb or gutter,
Yeah.
we're just going back the way it is.
Yeah, we just mill and overlay. Yeah, the curb and gutter just spikes the prices crazy. So that's always useful. We have a road reconstruction, kind of like College and 13th. We can kind of factor that in, but no curb and gutter on. If it doesn't show it, it won't get it. It'll just be a mill and overlay. And then Dunn's Canyon was the one that was being on our list for quite a while. You feel like it's a newer section of roadway, but if you drive down it, you can see how much crack sealing we've done. The road, again, subgrade is in fairly decent shape. It's just a heavily traveled road, heavily trafficked roadway. And one of the things that we were talking about as a group was Dawson Ridge now. I mean, everything's almost built out over there. The water tower is complete. There's going to be less heavy construction vehicles and stuff running through there. So I think this is going to time out nicely to redo this road and really get some longevity back to a 2005 bond. Was it, Sam? Yeah. So, you know, we're kind of close to the 20-year mark. And I think just think about the impact in this area, traffic wise. And I think that this mill and overlay will do that job well. You'll notice back on the adults, if you've read through, we excluded a couple from the actual recommendation that we'll be making tonight. One of those was Sparta Road. There's kind of a bit of a dip as you're driving not near the elementary school. That was a full depth repair, asphalt repair. So instead of doing 2 inches, 6 inches of asphalt, we've done that repair in 2015. We could make it now. It was about $80,000 in the adult. We could do it now and probably get about 5 more years, and then we'll be sitting there going, can we get another 80 for it? So what we're going to do is we're going to get Langham and Foster, the geotechnical folks, take a quick look at it. If we feel like there's a quick repair on that or a quick stabilization, then we will maybe try to include it and go back and address it in the street maintenance plan. I'll kind of get to that, our maybe tools in our tool bag as we kind of move forward on that.
It's a hidden aquifer with lots of water down there.
Someone told me there's a fault line that runs through there. I don't know. It's
Junior.
it's kind of crazy, but
Well, if you're driving the speed limit, you don't notice it as much.
It's
Just
very
saying.
true. If we drive this,
Just saying.
I like that. Yeah.
just leave the.
Do you mind if I use that in
I
the
don't mind
emails
at
that people who complain? I'll just,
I don't
were you driving the speed limit?
Back, we just get the Sparta lights 24/7.
So we got that. And then we took out 2 of the roadways that are that we had that touched the Standpipe Park. We felt like the timing at the time we thought it was a good idea to put them in, and then realized we've just designed the park. We're going to build it probably hopefully in January of next year. And it's all of a sudden you're going to have all this heavy equipment around that area. So we felt pull that off, hopefully try to come back and address it at a future one.
Very cool.
Not my forte, John. I don't even know the American Asphalt Index. Don't ask me a question. What I'm trying to say is, please. I've got a point on this image, which is it looks a lot like the oil, West Texas oil, whatever crude. I could talk your language one day, John. I'll learn it. But one of the things I wanted to highlight was we have 2 years worth of streets rolled into this proposal that we're giving you. And that is because last year we were kind of at the biggest spike in March of 22 that we were going out for this. We were ready to take it to bid in April. Just a quick revision as to where we've come from with asphalt. We do ours by the square yard price. So this is just kind of a reflection, but in our 2021, we had $9.65. We then came to January and we got $11.50 for all the work behind us at the Harris Center. We thought, you know what, that's maybe a chance that we could still go out with this and get a good price. Then we got Avenue S, it was $25, which was the low bid, which was March of 2022. That was low bid, $25. So that kind of sent us into a real panic pause with the oil prices. And then we came back in May, got $15.35 on East Street. Not bad. I started to think about maybe bringing it back out. We got 19 on Heritage Park. Stopped again. We were kind of riding that spike through there. So bringing that forward, the base plan that you see today is $14.45. So we are, it's obviously much higher than 2021, but it is not as high, and things seem to have stabilized a little bit since we've kind of got there on that. We got 2 bids. I will say, sometimes you see 2 bids and you feel like, where is the advertising or the interest? This is quite specific type work, so I think if you've seen these come through in the past, it's typically 2 or 3 that do it. So, we had 9 contractors holding plans, 7 subcontractors, et cetera. Texas Materials was the low bid award. If you imagine College and 13th as A, street maintenance base as B, that's what we have advertised together. We intentionally put them together because we were trying to beef up the project to really get the maximum price. So we kind of go out together. It's why actually you don't see Pearl Street in there. Pearl Street, if you remember, is part of this design. We kind of held back because there's a few things in the works there with Norman's and just what that road needs to be. We've shot ahead with College to try and get it out with this plan to hopefully get more hungry bids. And I think we got that. So College 13, base bid of street maintenance, and then the adult brings us to 2.853 million in total award. We have that funded through a few different avenues, through the general fund allocation, capital funds from previous year set aside, and then some ARPA funds as well that come along with that. I will tell you that we also have potentially the funding. If you award this tonight as presented, of 2.8, I think is about $700,000 that we could potentially award in change order pricing. That's our 25% cap. And I would probably tell you that we've got the ability to do that. And I think that there's certainly some streets that didn't make the cut on our base list because we were kind of anticipating, we didn't know where to land that ship. We were thinking 18 to 20, we get 14, all of a sudden it looks like we were kind of low. And so we've got more streets that we'd like to add. Your input will be valuable on that as well, but that's kind of what we got. 120 working days to Texas Materials. Texas Materials has done, I think, about every single street maintenance plan that we've had, except bar 1 year. They're great people, great work, very comfortable with that. And they have 120 working days, of which we will be very much pushing streets and locations near schools to get done first. Capitalize on the summer while they're all out, and we'll try to get that going. So that's our plan. Sorry for talking a little bit about this.
That's great, man. Wow.
Yeah, that's great. So we'll open it up for questions. So you guys have any comments or questions on this?
Appreciate all your hard work.
Yeah,
Y'all have been really, really busy. We appreciate it.
And we appreciate the wisdom of pausing last year to say, hey, let's not just spend money in this calendar year just because. So to that point, you said that there are some other streets. 2.8 is the recommended bid. Is there, how much do we have an allocated another amount above that? What was the?
We could go up to $700,000 off that change order.
Okay.
By 25%.
Gotcha. Up to
That's what you would have authorized the city manager to go up. Yeah.
Okay.
So for 700,000, you can
So that would be a future action based on consensus of the council to look at that or
If it
not.
went over, if
Okay.
it went over the 50, which probably they would, we'd bring them back as a, yes,
Yeah.
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 We try to maybe bring it back in one neater package that says,
Yeah.
hey, we'd like to do these extra.
Okay,
streets.
understood. Yep.
What's the original budget amount? I know it says 2.8 is in the budget, but
So
on top of change order, what?
3.5?
Yeah, so it's kind of made up in a couple of ways. There's 1.3 million for College Street. So if you can imagine, that came in quite under budget based on that side. So there's that capital funding that we kind of are lumping in with the street maintenance as well. And then you have $1 million in general fund, so 2.3, plus you have the allocation from last year, another 600,000. Mike, you're looking like you want to jump in there. I will give you the floor here.
Give you the room to
But yeah,
handle.
so I think it's roughly about 3 million. And then if you added the ARPA allocation that you want to kind of, you can get as many numbers as you want, but I think with this contract award, it would be 700,000 you could go up to.
Okay.
And to clarify too, ARPA money has a spending deadline. So what we'll do when we run this through our system, we're going to spend ARPA money first. So the $1.5 million that council has allocated of ARPA funding towards streets, I think we should spend that money down first, get it out of the way, and then the remaining money that Matt's mentioning that's already in capital project funds will still be there. For instance, the 1.3 million that we have set aside already for 13th and College, we may not even need or won't need for 13th and College. We can use that in a future street maintenance program.
Okay. All right. So,
I'm, oh, go ahead.
nope. Go
I
ahead.
was ready to go.
Yeah, I was gonna say any more
I
questions?
move we approve agenda item number 10 is presented.
Second.
I was just gonna add in, that number is 4.5 million that we budgeted. So I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, so for this one, we'll award this is the awarding the 2.8. Any future would then be future council action. So.
Yep.
We look at that. All right, so we have a motion, a second. Any other comments? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, very exciting. I'm glad to see us putting money on some streets that
Yeah.
really need it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, next item is consider award and bid and authorizing the city manager to execute the construction contract for the Southwest Parkway Improvement Project and any change orders associated with the contract not to exceed the amount authorized under state law. And Matt.
Yep, just waiting on our IT director to,
Wake
follow
up.
instructions.
Is this the new roundabout?
Oh, don't worry. Yeah, 34 slides, I'm only 20 through. Right. So, no, I'm sorry, you'll have to see this all again. Thanks, Chris. We are here. So we're at the Southwest Parkway Improvements Project. So I think, again, you know about this. Some of y'all who are on tours certainly are familiar with this project. This is a huge connector piece for us. It is a collector street that will probably eventually run south of Loop 121 in some capacity, really north all the way to Avenue O. We were talking about some of those are kind of exiting Avenue O, Connell area. 1,200 foot of roadway, some roadway widening. There's a ward line extension for some looped connectivity, a lot of storm sewer, big drainage area, this area, and then some streetlights and fire hydrants. This is the aerial map. So you all may have been either side of this, Huey Drive by the jail. The jail is just north of your screen there to the west. And then obviously the vet clinic here on Loop 121 down here on the south, and the expo center. You can see the parking lot right there. So this is your project zone. You can see kind of the gray interconnected with the purple ribbon along it. That is essentially the roadway that will be built. It won't be it's a sort of bridge. It's with box culverts that they'll be making it through, but they'll build it up. And I've got Turley here and DNT Construction. I guess that's you guys. Awesome. So we've got them here, but that's the project. They'll be expanding that. It connects it through. And right now, if you look all the way on the right side of the screen, that shows to be undeveloped. Well, that's developed now. That's the Ridge of Bell Meadow, Southwood Hills area. It's kind of all that construction. So really important connector for folks with Connell and Loop 121 and Huey already seeing a lot of action. So to be clear, what we'd be recommending here as I go through that is the full bid award. There was a base bid, which was the road work and the sidewalk on the east side. And then there was the purple was the adult 2, which was sidewalks on both sides. Since it's a collector street, it's residential. I think it's appropriate at this location. would be my opinion to share with you all on that. The areas red and green, the reason why those were on there is potentially you could just wait for that corner to develop. And then they would be responsible for the perimeter street improvements and the sidewalk. We don't have any plans in the works on that. I think this is a really important public project. And I think we'll show you with the funding that we've got the funds to get that. It came in aggressive, very, very competitive bids that we want to go out and get all this work done with it. We received 4 bids. D&T Construction from Round Rock was the low bid on this job. We interviewed them on May 4th. We met with Jeremy and talked through them. We have never worked with D&T, but we know them. We a lot of folks had some familiarity with them. We haven't personally worked with them in Belton. So just a chance for us to, gauge the excitement coming north here from Round Rock and their interest. That's a very hungry bid for them to go get. And so we were pleased with them. They are a big operation. They go all the way to Waco, all the way to San Antonio. 40 projects in the Austin area alone going on right now. Very, very good. And so we're fully capable. They can do the work. But you see the bids there. A few of them pretty tight there at the top for sure. And then with that, the days on the contract may have 240 days. I think that they've articulated that they would love to be aggressive on that and try and be out of here well before 240. But that's the bid on the days. We had about 1.9 million set aside in the TERS funding for this project. So to come in at 1.426, that's huge. Following the TERS, there's a lot of things out there with what we want to try and do with maybe some designs and future projects. That money now could be reallocated to another priority project. So we're very excited with this bid, and we would like to recommend it all to all the work to D&T Construction.
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, this was important to the county as well. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to do. Mhm.
Right, any other questions or comments?
Well, you've made Matt happy by trying to get all that schoolwork done. And now you're working with the county. So those are good steps.
Partnerships.
Partnerships.
UMHB with college. I mean, we're all there, man.
We're good. Good jobs.
I'll make a motion that we approve item number 11 as presented.
Second.
Motion and second to authorize the city manager to award these contracts. Any other discussion before we vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Matt. I don't think you're done yet. So item 12.
Left,
Yeah. Item 12 is consider authorizing the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Turley Associates for construction administration services for the Southwest Parkway Improvements Project.
Yep, pretty routine construction admin here. This project was designed and engineered by the Turley Group. So that's Anthony and Will, if they want to just wave at you that. Great group. Enjoyed working with them since we started going on this project. And so this will be routine with scheduling pre-com work, pay apps, on-site visits, technical questions with RFIs. And we're pleased to recommend their construction admin for $12,000.
Awesome. Any questions, comments, or motion?
Move we approve agenda item number 12.
Second.
Motion is second to approve item 12. Any other discussion before we vote? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. We're all getting along. It's great. Speaking of, item 13, lucky 13. Receive a presentation on the strategic plan update. Mr. Hogberg.
My other star student.
Well, good evening, and I was wanting the record corrected that I am his favorite.
Yes.
Just wanted that corrected.
Hey, thank you guys for your work on this. Great, Scott, you guys. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Right, good evening. This is the strategic plan update from our work session a couple months ago. What we're going to do is go through an introduction, then we will have the talk about the major emergent areas of our conversation that we had that day, and then the highlighted topics of discussion, and then going into the strategic plan with the enhanced plan objectives. So first of all, For the last couple of decades, y'all have gone through this process every 3 years. And in my opinion, the most important part of these workshops is the conversations that you all have. And that allows you to relate to long-range priorities. It helps you plan your decisions as well as update that multi-year plan, the implementation plans. So we'll talk about the major areas of focus first. Across the conversation, several of these areas emerged. And so I grouped them into 5. And the first one was the shift of emphasis going to development of existing infrastructure from expansion. And so, and these are in no particular order.
Other
So
than
with
they do
the
say 1 through 5. I'm sorry.
1-ish, 2-ish, 3-ish,
Yes.
5-ish. The with the current environment, as with the legislature, that necessitated some of this. One of the comments that y'all made that was of note was, if the community gets the core right, the rest will follow. And so that's sort of highlights that shift to taking care of the existing infrastructure. The next theme, next area of focus was the coordination among existing plans. The city has lots of plans, from future land use, the thoroughfare, water and sewer TERS. And it was discussed that it would be nice to be able to see all those together, so that when you make your deliberations, that you'd have all the information available. And one of the things that came across was the council wanting, in those important decisions wanting to be confident and wanting it to be consistent. And so that ties into the existing plans. The next one, focus on downtown and the vicinity. The rapid development of downtown in recent years, and particularly with the Imagine Belton piece from the Belton EDC, that has renewed the focus on downtown. So there's lots of development opportunities in both public and private opportunities for that. The next was talking about the EDC partnership and role. This came about of wanting a coordinated vision, as well as detailing what the potential collaboration opportunities with the EDC. And then lastly, the professional development and collaboration opportunities. One of the other themes that came across from our conversations was that the need for having the time to learn particularly detailed information and be able to, on those very specific, complex issues, to be able to have time to absorb that information and think about it before the decisions are made. So that was number 5-ish. And while we group those into those 5 pieces, there were other conversations throughout the day that felt that it was warranted mentioning, even though they weren't in the 5 main ones. The first one was the visionary leadership of the council. As we said, this was you've been doing this for a couple of decades, and that has served the council well. And it helps being on the same page as you go forth. Next was water and wastewater, particularly in the summer and in those high peak usage. That's always a consideration that needs to be considered. Housing affordability, that came up from a couple different conversations and particularly wanting to take care of our diverse community. Operation standards, that there was two different pieces with that. One was budgeting and one was operations. And it was discussed that having those standards help with those, again, that being confident and being consistent in those decisions. Infill development, again, sort of related to the operational standards, is creating those acceptable standards, particularly with that has been mentioned already, the multi-family buildings for in particular. The next, quality of life, quality of place. Always it comes across is the community's unique character, and being able to accentuate those and leverage those things so that the live, work, play environment of the city can come forth. And then with the municipal needs, both staffing and facility wise, and with the age of the facilities and the growth that's happening, now's a great time to assess that and get the comprehensive plan developed for both staffing and facility needs. So those were the conversations that you had. And the next part, we're wanting to take some of those ideas and put them into action. And so we have some recommendations for you to consider based on your conversations. And this one is ordered chronologically. First one is finalizing the multiple fiscal supplemental packages. I believe that's already been in the works, and so finalizing those. And particularly as the conversation occurred was with personnel as well as facilities. The next item was creating separate organizational subcommittees. One of the pieces again that came across was having that time, having to have that specific conversation about those complex issues. And one of the ways to accommodate that is through various subcommittees. And that way it can be processed before you make your decisions. Number 3, update existing plans. A lot of conversation was being able to have all the information in those plans, and that serves as a resource for your decisions. And so making sure that all those plans are updated and being able to be incorporated into a form where you can use as a reference. Next item was strengthen the coordination between the city and the Belton EDC, and thinking specifically with coordinating the objectives, the functions, and the capabilities and the various opportunities that are available between y'all's relationship. Next, reviewing Main Street traffic study. That came up several times. The traffic in the community, particularly at particular times of the day. And so want to make sure that when that's released, that's on your radar to evaluate, and those will be I'm sure hard discussions as you move forward. Item 6, developing an onboarding process for new members as well as professional development opportunities for all members. Again, that goes back to making sure you have all the information that you need. And then as new council members come on board, having a formal structure of these are things that they need to know, and things that are of the most importance for them to understand in all the processes. Number 7, reconcile the plans and timelines with Imagine Belton. Imagine Belton was viewed very positively by the council, and that so being able to take that, put those into the city plans and make sure that those are reconciled, that those are jive with each other as you move forward. Item 8, multi-year proposal dealing with staffing positions. This is related to item 1, and that you have needs, being able to create a multi-year plan so that you know that they're eventually going to be taken care of, but prioritizing so that you can year 1 take care of the highest priorities and then moving forward with that. Item 9, exploring downtown parking options. Lots of conversation there, from parking garage to land that can be purchased or leased. And a lot of the conversation was making sure that that was multi-use, and that could be both the public and private funding for those type solutions. Number 10, recommendations to address multiple facility needs. Then 11 and 12, they are related. One of the things that almost to a council member that was mentioned when it was talked about what's important for the council and for the city, and that was those critical functions with public safety and public works. And so making sure that those are continue to be talked about, and emphasizing the specific needs, as well as being able to adjust for the ever-changing landscape of the city and the community. And then last, number 13, reconciling the plans with city plans with the Imagine Belton document. And that's a separate item, because if you initially do it, which was a previous item, that's great, but once all that hard work is done, you want to just routinely update that so that it continues to be relevant and helpful for the council. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
That's great. Exciting.
I'll just,
A+.
Yeah.
yeah, says the teacher.
Yeah.
John, you gonna say something, get a like A++? Okay. Good.
It's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to the staff, also to the council for taking the time to do this. It is really important. I think just having those conversations and not sitting here to talk about it is really good. It's eye-opening. It's nice to see that. So again, thanks for the presentation. You're double unlucky. You were item 13 on the agenda. You had 13 items to present to us. I mean, I don't know if that was planned or just as numerology or something, you know.
I'll make sure I take the back roads home. So
Okay. No black cats across the road.
Appreciate all Eric's work. We worked closely on kind of working the schedule, the chronology to try to work into the budget, and that's why this item comes up before Mike's item, to kind of set the stage for the implementation of all these items. We'll take this information now and finalize the strategic plan components as a document, a standalone document, as a part of the budget that we're in the process of developing right now. So appreciate all the council's input and Eric's great work on this.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Last item on the agenda is conduct a work session on fiscal year 2024 budget consideration, including but not limited to the following: general budget and the debt service fund. Mr. Rogers.
Mayor, I do want to ask if you want to take a break before we get started.
Do we,
asking you?
probably, we've been here for a little while. It's probably good for us to take a couple of minute break and then, yeah.
Wake
all right.
up, do some
wake
jumping
up.
jacks.
Yeah, calisthenics, eat some
That's right.
sugar.
That's right.
All right, see you guys here in
5 in the day.
like 3 or 4 minutes. So.
Thank you, sir.
Good job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Whoa.
I want to do that.
Right?
Yeah. That depends.
Hey. Yes. Hey, that's good. That's good. It's even better if you throw it my way.
Actually, two more down here.
We'll get two of them.
It certainly de-emphasizes my relative to mine. I'm here either way. That's exactly right. Couldn't have done it without.
Thanks for bowing out.
And plus, you heard me saying that, well, I'm gonna be calling. I mean, just play it on, stay plug in, but need to get out of town for a while. So just go right here on freaking 30. There's more reasons than that.
Happy for you.
What y'all gonna do this summer? What are y'all gonna do this summer?
And we're going to Costa Rica in the fall. I'm not sure yet about the summer.
Are we 8 tomorrow, 8:15, or 8:30?
Road scholars. Around there. Drop back and make it on the way back.
Wow.
I got it.
4:30 to 5:30, definitely my fault.
I think I might have to make my way to work.
Hey, stop talking.
They bought the property across the street. He told you that. They bought the piece right across the street. They added to something they owned already. And so they're working on their design of how that's all gonna work. So they're gonna be crossing the street, that you're gonna have to control that. And not just consume. One thing done. Oh, really? I just.
Shoot, Andy had this. Thanks for helping. Oh, yeah, it was it.
Boy, howdy. I can sure have that conversation with them and just see if any stretch of the imagination that would happen, like they did on Penelope, you know, there where they wiped out the street.
Good way to put that. How do you like the show?
It's nice.
I like it.
Good people to sit by.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Man,
We know what's going on.
probably not.
He was here 30 seconds.
They certainly asked. They asked and I just. Yeah.
It's a good place. You can see everything. Nothing forward behind you.
And never not, everybody's not staring straight at you when you make a mistake.
Right.
We're out.
You did a great job.
No, but
I would miss it.
I enjoyed it. I just wish. Can't change your age. I just wish I don't. Start now. 4 years ago. A little more energy and, you know.
Well, I thought you were fantastic. And we'll have fun. in the school year.
You know. Joking about.
Was that crazy or was that hurry up?
It's really, it's a privilege to see people grow up.
It's so good, I gotta tell you.
Yourself, it's just been a role model.
We could
I'm not
not
kidding.
have had a better.
It's been the
That's
one.
what I'm
All right.
saying.
We didn't officially adjourn, but we'll just reconvene.
Let's
Keep
go.
on going. Ready? Item 14.
Mayor and council, we're going to start an in-depth discussion now on our fiscal 24 budget. I'll try not to speak as quickly as Billy did, but we'll get through this. So first, we're going to have to talk about two funds tonight, the general fund and the debt service fund. Before we get too far into 24, let me tell you how we might in 23. So we'll start this fiscal year. We started this fiscal year with $6.8 million in reserves in the general fund. In 23, we budgeted 21.2 million and we budgeted 20,784,000 for expenditures, planning to increase reserves by about $500,000 at the end of this year. What it looks like where we may end is that the revenues may come in about $1 million more than we budgeted. Expenditures are right on line. So instead of adding this 500,000, we may end up adding $1.5 million to reserves at the end of 23. That's our forecast as of today. So why is that? Why did we have this extra money? Well, interest income is the big one. Interest yields started creeping up towards the end of the last quarter of 22 as we were developing the 23 budget. Since then, taken off, we're right about 5% now in interest earnings. So budgeted, we're going to exceed that by like almost $500,000. Refuse related items, trash pickup should come in about $143,000 higher. And then also at the end of 22, we added a school resource officer to the ISD. And we didn't really work those costs and the revenue into the fiscal 23 budget. So between that and kind of changing some of the way we accounted for some things, that service is going to go higher. So I just mentioned that we have this maybe $1.5 million surplus for 23. What would you want to do with that? I mean, there's several things that we could do. We could just roll it into fund balance and let it earn interest. We could do some capital type items with that. But one of the things that we thought about, you'll recall that we have various equipment replacement funds. And I told you before, those equipment replacement funds are significantly underfunded. In fact, our contribution schedule, we were going to ramp up over the next 3 years. 2023, we were contributing 75% of our annual contribution. In 24, our plan was 100% of the annual scheduled contribution. And then 25, 125% of our scheduled contribution just to catch us up. So what we could do is we could take 1.2 million of that transfer of that available funds at the end of fiscal 23 and move that into those equipment replacement funds. So that would do a couple of things for us. One, it would shore up the balances and make everything now funded. And it reduces our future contributions as well. So there's kind of a recurring, even though that's one-time money, there's kind of a recurring effect of that. So before you made this decision or whatever, if we don't do anything, our contributions in 24 is 1.4 million, 1.4 million in 25, 1.1 in 26, 1.1 in 27. But if we do make this contribution, 24's contribution would go down almost $300,000, $350,000. And it's another $300,000 in 25, and then $100,000 less each year. So again, we can kind of take this one-time money, throw it into these equipment replacement funds, and then be caught up from that point forward, and then have lower contributions going forward for a while. That's our recommendation, and we'll talk about it more as we get further along. Feel free to interrupt at any time.
You said let it ride and earn interest or move to this fund?
Yes,
Wouldn't it still earn interest in these funds?
it would.
Okay.
Another good option with this money, if you so choose, you could take, instead of doing this with it, you could put it aside for street maintenance. Another good one-time funding type of thing where we would do, just like we did in the previous years where we had a surplus, throw it into a capital project fund and then use it in 24 or 25. Just another option for that you could decide what you wanted to do with that surplus, if anything. Again, I don't know for a fact that we're going to have that 1.5 million, but I'm suspecting it's going to be something close to that.
So if we had nothing in the bank or steady, what I'm getting at is what's steady state? Because when I look at 24, it goes up and down 24 to 25 to 26 to 27. I mean, what's the,
Megan.
I mean, so if we didn't
Megan,
put any
Megan
money,
is the purveyor of that, and she knows all of it.
what's the ideal number?
So our ideal number ranges, it's about 1 million and then 50,000 is kind of see where it ends up in 27. That's kind of where we want to stay for the most part.
Okay.
I mean, we're gonna have different things that change it every year, things that get added on, or our projections only go out. Some funds go out 25 years. Some funds only go out 10 years, depending on what types of things they have in those funds.
And
So
what was our number this last year?
this last year, 23.
It was probably 1.2 or 1.3 and change, 1.2, 1.3. So we were increasing. This 1.4 was at 100% of that scheduled contribution, and last year was 75% of that annual
So
contribution.
we budgeted 1.3. We have a windfall of 1.5, adding $500,000 to our general fund. I'm a little hesitant to just say, hey, let's put that towards future.
Yeah, because it's,
Put that away. I'd rather earn interest on my, I would think maybe short term, earn interest on that in the general fund, increase the general fund, and evaluate that schedule moving forward, and maybe nick away at it, if you will, instead of just lump summing 1.2 million towards that. The other reason I'm also, we had a great call. I appreciate Mike's help so much. But one thing that comes into this is that, you know, we've also, the no revenue rate is going to come up in a minute. And, you know, we, our no revenue rate will be based on a $1.5 million surplus. So there's kind of just get ready. I mean, it gets pretty involved, but, you know, if you look at it, we missed some things. Interest was 500,000, a couple other things, that came in a little better than we expected. And so pretty big windfall, but I worry about the no new revenue rate kind of being inflated moving forward. Just with no new revenue, we're 1.5 ahead again. I'm sure we'll find a way to spend it.
thank you.
So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah.
Mike, I know nobody can predict the future, but with the slowdown in building and interest rates are good on that side, but we made so much money off building last couple of years. What do you think? What's your gut feeling on that?
We have a lot of platted land, platted lots, right? A lot of area that's coming. I don't think it's going to, I'll know more. I've requested a report from the comptroller's office, so and I should have that any day now. I'll be able to get a feel for more current information. I think we're going to slow down. It's not going to stop. I don't think. I think we have too much demand for housing, especially new homes. Existing sales are going to slow down, I suspect. But our money comes from the build and construction of new homes and things like that. So I think that'll still continue.
Is it building construction of where the home is or where the people who sell the product is?
Depends.
A little bit of both?
A little bit of both. Correct. Okay. It depends on how the individual contract was written for that particular construction project.
Understood.
And we do have the advantage of a lot of the builders are here, and even outside of the city, folks come in here to buy our building supplies, and I think we capture some of that.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a little bit of both, quite frankly. Keep this because this discussion we'll have later as well.
Yeah.
Well, the major catch up, if refresh my memory, we had a pretty big fire truck coming up pretty soon, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm to be on for full disclosure, most of this $1.2 million is going towards that fire truck.
How much is that fire truck again?
I think it's 2 million now. And
If we purchased it today, it would be about 2.2.
Oh,
If we wait until it's scheduled to go out, make the purchase, we're probably looking at more like 2.5 to 2.7.
I was hoping you're gonna say 1.215, but
All right.
so there's,
Yeah,
go ahead.
good. No, it's a good discussion to have is how to spend the money we have.
Absolutely.
So we'll
And this is
we'll
your
keep this, yeah,
completely up
we'll
to
put a
council.
pin
how
in
you
this
want
one and we'll keep
to- Absolutely.
chewing on this. Yeah.
Very good.
absolutely.
Okay. So that's 23. If let's
Can I
get
ask
into.
one more quick
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
Sorry, everybody.
No,
Just to clarify, does that needs to stay in a general fund expense, but or line item type, or can it move around the surplus?
It can go anywhere we want it to. go.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
It would, what we would do is we'll do a budget amendment for a year-end transfer to place that somewhere unless you just wanted to leave it in a general fund.
Okay, thank you.
So 24. We're in the middle of, actually, we're on the far end on our side, Megan and my side of creating a proposed budget to present in July. But if we were to transfer that 1.25, you might have this 7.1 million at the end of 23. If not, that number was going to be that 8.3 million. I won't go back that far. My apologies. But for 24, our fiscal revenues for 24 are 22,977,000, expenditures 22,753,000. So the plan would be increase reserves by $224,000 to $7,355,000. You'll notice that even though the dollar amount of reserves goes up, the budgeted the percent of expenditures goes down. That's because that as our expenditure budget increases, the reserve requirement increases with it. Still no real concerns there.
And just as a reminder.
Yes, sir.
The requirement is 25%. And we kind of set a goal as a council to have 30.
Correct.
Moving with additional 500,000, it goes up to 33.5%. If we were to keep the full 1 point, whatever it was.
Yeah, I think it was, if you,
40%.
yeah, if you left it in there, it's like 40. You're correct. Yes, and so that's that note at the bottom. Our policy says that we'll try to maintain 30. But what it says is the floor, the minimum fund balance is 25%. And you don't want to fall below 25% because our policy then requires action. In other words, you have to start cutting expenditures, you have to start raising revenues, et cetera, when you fall below 25%. That's our fund balance policy as it's written. Plus our financial advisor said, you really don't want to stay at the minimum fund balance. Analysts don't like that too much. So 30% is kind of where we're trying to land, and we're right in that ballpark. Right here.
So in real dollars, that's around $5.5 to $6 million.
The 25, yes, is about that.
Okay. So
Yeah, that's real minimum, correct.
Yep.
So this chart shows you where our revenues come from in the general fund. 37% of our revenues come from property taxes. Sales taxes make up 28% of our general fund revenues. This 16% is charges for services. Refuse collection is the biggest one of those.
like
I'm sorry?
the sales to property tax. Is that for a city as small as this? How does that compare?
That is fairly low, probably. Yes, a lot of times it's close to the majority is property taxes. We have a nice split here. So on a budget to budget basis, so these are our revenues categories. We had $21.2 million in revenues budgeted in 23, and I said we might come in at 22.2. And then And then this column here is our 24 budget. This column is the change on a dollar basis. This column is a change on a percentage basis. A couple of things I want to pinpoint just for your information. One here in property taxes, you'll see that for 23, we're actually expected to be under budget in revenue for property taxes, and sales taxes for 23 are just barely over what we budgeted. So just wanted to show you, that's not where the surplus is coming from. That surplus is coming from this miscellaneous income. That's your interest income. That charges for services is what I was referring to. That's refuse collection is what makes up most of that. That's what's making up that. But for 24, property taxes of $8.5 million is $573,000 or so.
Now that's based on a rate that is underlying, right? Because that's
correct. So what I'm using on this one is the no new revenue rate. And that's just me right now. All of these numbers are going to be moving as we go along. But even at no new revenue tax rate, we still bring in $573,000 of new money. That's from those new properties that were added to the $100 million worth of new properties that were added to the tax roll that you heard earlier tonight. Sales taxes goes up 5%. Your bigger adjustments here, that 700 really is a carryover from 23. So you see this here where it's 3.6 million versus an estimate of 3.3. So that budget, I'm adding to that. That's not all. 777 is not all brand new over what we're earning today. It's just increasing the budget. So moving forward, let's talk property taxes. You heard tonight, our property values are expected to grow significantly, 21%. Of that 387 million of new, 94 million of that is from the TERS, and non-TERS properties are $293 million of that increase. Of the 387 million in new value, 280 million of that is attributable to existing properties. And then the estimate that I have now, as they've updated things, is more like 107 million from new value. That's completely new property on the rolls. So I know tonight we're not proposing a tax rate. We're certainly not adopting a tax rate, but I wanted to kind of back up and kind of have some discussions of terms. So the no new revenue tax rate is the rate that raises the same amount of money from the same properties in 2 consecutive years in total. And mathematically, the way that works is as property values go up, the no new revenue rate goes down. And as property values go down, the no new revenue rate goes up. Just mathematically to get to the same amount from one year to the next. Now, our property tax rate also has 2 components. We have a debt service component. That is the amount that you have to raise to pay your bond obligations. And then you have an M&O component. M&O is basically everything else, salary, wages, all that kind of good stuff. The voter approval rate is the rate that raises 3.5% more money for M&O plus that debt service rate. If you go over that 3.5% voter approval rate, then you have to have an election for voters to ratify that. However, that voter approval rate is adjusted for an unused increment rate. This is something they came up with when they went to the 3.5% voter approval rate. An unused increment rate basically says if you adopt less than the voter approval rate in any year, you get to carry that tax rate forward for 3 years. So if the voter approval rate, say, was 60 cents and we adopt a rate that's 53, that 3 cents increase can adjust your voter approval rate in successive years. That calculation will be changed with this legislative session. There's bills on there to kind of change the way that it's not just a flat cent, it's based upon dollars. Probably makes more sense anyway. There's also a thing called the de minimis rate. This de minimis rate is formerly known as the fire engine rate, back when you could buy a fire engine for $500,000, which nobody can do. But essentially it was for small towns to say, okay, you can get, what's the rate that requires that will take to get an additional $500,000 so you can go buy that fire engine. And that's the de minimis rate. When that de minimis rate surpasses the voter approval rate, it's actually then the de minimis rate that's your voter approval rate, not the voter approval rate that's your voter approval rate. Does that make any sense? That's what they wrote. Okay. So I have that estimated value from Belcad. And I can take that then and then put it in the tax worksheets and kind of give you a feel for where our tax rates might be. What I'm going to ask you to do, though, is do not focus specifically on these rates. Because one, I don't have a certified roll yet, and those things change as we go along. But what I can tell you is these are going to be probably fairly close, give or take. So our current tax rate is 58.5. Based upon the new values, as you see, this voter approval, the no new revenue rate might be a 52.5 cent no new revenue rate. That de minimis rate would be close to 55, and the voter approval rate adjusted for the unused increment that we have that we can carry over is going to be close to 57. So the short thing is that 58.5, we're probably not going to be able to stay at unless you want to have an election. We can certainly adopt that rate if you choose, but
We'd have many elections if we had that election.
yeah, 7 of them, in fact. Exactly.
At least 7.
So I want to remind you then, again, please don't focus on these rates exactly. What I want you to kind of leave with is it looks like our tax rate can go down significantly based upon that. You'll recall this discussion we had a while back about this silver supplemental package. And that silver supplemental package included several positions for public safety, police officers, crime scene tech, et cetera, firefighter, deputy fire marshal. Parks and Recreation added a person. Then we have some recreation type items there. And then on the general administrative side, we would add like associate judge, a planning technician, and some other general government type things. When we had that discussion before, I told you it looked like it would take a tax rate of 58.5 to do the silver supplemental package. What I'm telling you now is it looks like we could do that same silver supplemental package with something closer to that no new revenue rate. Okay. So that's all because just the values have increased the way they were, the way they have. Again, not focusing exactly on the number. It's not going to be 52.33. But it looks like we could do a lot with it dropping. In fact, if you would like, instead of going all the way down to the no new revenue rate, whatever that no new revenue rate is, we could maybe add 2 more firefighters for about $150,000. And based upon our taxable values, it would be less than a penny increase over no new revenue rate if we added 2 new firefighters. 2 additional firefighters over the one that's in the silver supplemental. So that would complete an entire shift at one station. So because there's 3 shifts, and right now we just have 1 in the silver. So those 2 extras would get you a full shift, 1 per shift at one of the stations. So just an idea if you want to go, somewhere above no new revenue. So let's look at property tax history. Just kind of want to show you some history from 2017 to 2024. We started at about $4 million in the O&M side. And now we're at 8.5. That's like a 70% increase over these 7 years. TERS went from 728 all the way to 2 million or so. That's 187% increase. And then debt is debt. That number is based upon whatever debt service we have in that particular year. But this is how the money is being kind of what that levy's for.
So
yes, sir.
Say that again. Debt has to do with whatever debt you have in that particular year, but your basis of what you're multiplying. So are you saying that debt rate will go up and down based on what your valuations are?
It will. Correct.
So our rate for debt, which is probably the next item, that service fund is, we'll talk about that rate next.
I don't think I get into debt rate and O&M rate, but
okay.
Yes, but you're correct. So like this $1.2 million is real dollars that we have to recover from a levy. Because our values went up, our debt rate to get to that number is going to go down. I don't, it was like 7 or 8 cents in 23. It's probably going to be obviously less than that in 24. And I probably have that if you need it. The way,
Just trying to equate what's the total rate.
Yeah.
Drop if you add the two together. So if a general homestead cap, right? So there's the cap is people are seeing 10% increase in appraised value. They'll
Right.
see potentially more than a 10%. If we did no new revenue,
Yeah.
because of the debt service, they'll actually see more of a rate. That's why I was.
yeah,
just
real
trying to-
dollars that they have to write the check for.
Yeah,
Yeah, that we'll
yeah.
have to do that. I didn't want to get too much into that just yet because again, these numbers are going to change.
Yeah.
But I can certainly do that for an example.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one thing that has changed, just FYI, as we talk about debt rates and things like that. The number is now what the number is. It used to be that you could raise your debt rate or lower your debt rate and bring in less money and reallocate and all that. That is no longer the case. The debt rate is what the debt rate is, and it's calculated by the appraisal district who does our worksheets for us. We tell them how much debt we have to pay. They apply the rate to it, and that's what the rate is.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let me show you some property tax history. That's numbers. So you can see there over time here, the bars you see are the real dollars that we're bringing in for these things. And you can see that that's been increasing from this $7 million up to that 12. This bar that you see here is the actual tax rate on this side of the graph. So all the way from 2017, all the way to 2020. In fact, all the way back to 2013, we had a tax rate of 65.98 per 100. We then lowered that tax rate in 21 to 63 and kept it there for a couple of years. 23, we're at 58.5 and we're moving down from there. So as values have, even though we're bringing in more tax levy, we're doing our part by reducing the tax rate. I mean, it's property value driven, this levy that you see here. It also may be just completely a coincidence, but your finance director started about that time there. And then after that, everything's kind of gone that way. So I don't know, it's maybe just coincidence. So that's property tax revenue. On the sales tax side, this upper teen % growth that we've seen over the past few years is done. I'm expecting about a 7% in the current year.
But a real key to that, so you say that's done, there's also a lot of catch up for the homeowner. I mean, if my property valuation has gone up 30%, I'm capped at 10 from the.
Yes.
I've got more years to go.
Yeah, this is sales tax revenue, but
Awesome.
but you were exactly right on the property. Thanks for bringing that up. So where do I think the property values are going to go? We still have some catching up to do because as everybody, all the residents are up here at 10%, that's the maximum, but the value is maybe 30. Well, every year you're going to keep bumping up to get closer to market value. So I think we have some growth still in our property values. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a good point. Sales tax revenue again the growth is decreasing. I don't think it's going down. I don't think we're going negative growth, but it looks like it's going down. I like to say, well, what are other people saying? The comptroller in his biennial revenue report predicts state of Texas sales tax to grow by 2.5% in 2024 and 5.53 in 2025. The number I'm using for 24 is a 5%. I think we can hold that. It may be a little bit aggressive, but based upon say what the comptroller is saying. But I think, our makeup is a little bit different as well. So here's the chart. That's what sales tax growth looks like from $3 million up to $6.5 million. This is that very large increase what we had in 2021 and 22. Again, 7.1 is where I'm expecting to land in 23, and then we'll budget for 5 in 24. Some of those other significant revenues, I talked about refuse collection before. That's purely based upon growth. As more people need trash service, that revenue goes up. That's really a waste management pass-through is what that is. Interest income. So what I'm doing with interest income is trying to be a bit conservative Right now, our yields are about 5%, just under or just over. I don't know if that's going to hold the entire fiscal year. So what I'm doing for budgeting purposes is reducing the fiscal 24 budget by 20% of where I think we're going to land in 23. That's basically assuming the rates might get closer to 4 than staying up at 5. I don't know where that's going to go. I don't, 0 is not in play any longer. So that's a good thing. Also, ARPA funding in 23, we had $900,000 for labor in the general fund. For 24, I'm going to move over 262,000. That's the remaining amount of ARPA funding for labor. You'll recall that we allocated $1.2 million of ARPA funds to implement the pay study, the compensation study. We used 900,000 of that in the general fund and some in the water sewer and some of the other funds. What's left unallocated or unspent of that 1.2 million is this 262. And I'm just bringing that into the general fund for now. So now let's look at expenditures in the general fund. And I like to look at expenditures in a few different ways and kind of bring you down as we into details as we go. So first by function, these are the government general fund functions: general government, public safety, streets, planning, culture, rec, et cetera. 51% of our general fund expenditures go towards public safety, by far the largest of any of the functions that government provides, which actually makes a whole lot of sense. General government is 12%. That's the administrative type division: city council, city manager, finance, court, human resources, et cetera, make up that general government function. So on an expenditure by function, again, here's the thing. Our budget was 20,784,000. We're going to come in probably right in line with budget at 20,742,000. Our budget for 24 increases by almost $2 million to 22,753,000. You can see that most of that increase, most of the $1.9 million increase goes to public safety. And that's the addition of all of this staff that we talked about with the silver supplemental plan. Okay. Solid waste, I mentioned before, that's just refuse collection. But expenditures themselves going up 1 million on a budget to budget basis, going up $1.9 million. So we go from looking at expenditures by function to looking at those same expenditures by department. Again, these are our departments that we have at the city. Police is 32%, fire is 18% of our expenditures in the general fund. Taking that same expenditure level and now breaking it down a little further in a little greater detail. This is by department now. You can see these large increases here. If my little pointer will point at them. $895 for police, $393,000 for fire from fiscal 23 to fiscal 24. Let's see, solid waste again, I mentioned there at 270,000. Again, totals is $1.9 million greater in 24. Now let's go even in lower detail and look at it by category. And I'll go in to explain these in greater detail. So personnel costs make up 59% of the general fund's budget. That's actually quite good. Typically you'll see cities personnel budgets in the say 65 to 72% of the budget. I mean, why is that? Well, we're a service organization and it requires people to do to do that. Services make up 24%. So let's take the same expenditure now and break it down in that category. Again, $1.9 million increase from one budget to the next. And there again, in personnel is where most of that increase is occurring. So I'm going to go through and explain these in some detail as to why those categories are changing the way they're doing. Well, for fiscal 24, we plan to add 9 FTEs to the budget for $611,000. So we have 3 police officers. We have a crime scene technician. One thing to note on that crime scene technician is that will be a civilian position. And it's currently being, that job function is being performed by a police officer, right? So once this becomes a civilian position, we'll actually be adding technically 4 police officers onto the street because we're now converting a one position to civilian. This dispatcher, we're looking at 2 part-time dispatcher positions, which equates to 1 full-time equivalent. And here's a deputy fire marshal and 1 firefighter, a maintenance tech in public works, and a planning technician in planning. All that is about $611,000. What else is happening on the personnel side? Well, pay adjustments of one kind or the other is $450,000. So here's what we did on that. We moved in accordance with what our consultant recommended, who did our compensation study. She recommends, and all consultants will, HR consultants, is to move your pay scales on an annual basis, say 1 to 2% every single year. And by doing that, your pay scales keep up with the market. So when the next time they come out, we should be more in line. So what we did is we moved all of the pay scales for all employees up 2%. If an employee then falls off the scale, in other words, they were at the minimum and you move the scale and now they're not on the scale. Everybody's got to be on a scale. Then that employee would get an increase to get them back on the scale. Well, when we do that, the only people that's affected by that is civil service. Just by the nature of civil service has a fixed salary amount, there's steps. And so when you move the scale, you got to move the person with it. But that scale adjustment is has a cost of $94,000. Civil service is also now annually receiving a 2.5% step increase that used to be 2.5% every other year until council made the wise decision in the part of the compensation study implementation to change that. So civil service, essentially employees would get around 4.5% pay increase in 24. On the non-civil service side, so non-civil service folks would be able to get a merit increase, of up to 5%. So that means that you can earn 0 or 5 and somewhere in between. When we budgeted for this, the cost is about $177. We're not budgeting 5%. The last time we did the 5%, it came in about 4.25%, like 4.125, I believe, percent. So we're budgeting 4.125, but the maximum that you could award is 5. And then last, the other thing we're doing differently, based upon some comments of council last year, is we're putting some money in the city manager's budget for what we're calling discretionary pay increases. In other words, there may be some employees out there who've just done a bang up job all year round, and really 5%, which is the most that you could get under the merits, under that merit increase for, say, non-civil service, 5% is just not really enough for what this employee has done. They're just doing a great job, or maybe they're just getting, it's just for whatever reason. It's over and above the merit, the normal merit adjustment type thing. So when we did this, we did like 1% of payroll, just as a number. Where do we start? And when we did that, that number came out to this $97,000. That is for now, that is in the city manager's budget, again, for him to make the decision, if there are any, and there may be none, to award this discretionary increase. That number might be too high. If it's certainly council may decide to do something less than that if you desire, and we'll repurpose that money. But what we have in there now, again, it's for that exemplary performance. What we have in there now is $97,000. Trying to address those.
You can always double the council salary.
Yeah.
Yes, it would. That's exemplary performance right there.
Exactly.
Give you $250. Moving on to supplies. So there's some supplemental type $20,000 in park facilities for some recreation type stuff. shade covers at picnic tables, an automatic lighting system at one of our ball fields. We have 19,900 in the community center. As Matt said so eloquently, as he can in his British accent, when you replace the windows, all of a sudden these blinds look horrible. So we need to replace all the blinds in this building. And so part of most of that $19,000 in the community center budget is for this building right here. Did I cover that? Okay. So the fire department has $16,000 for fire hose, a small trailer, et cetera, in its budget. And then fuel costs continue to go up. So we increase the fuel appropriation by 12,000. Also in the fire department, some of the furniture in the fire station is over 20 years old. Probably time to replace some of that. So there's like 25,000 for furniture. Also want to do a top coating at Station 2, I believe, of the parking lot back there. So the total is 51,000 for that. There's some of this sports type maintenance items, soccer goals, backstops, disc golf baskets, things like that, that we need to replace in 24 as well. That's 34,000. And unfortunately, our vehicle maintenance costs are still going up as well with repair costs increasing. So we need to increase our appropriations by that. Moving on to services. Refuse collection, again, that's waste management. As more customers come in, that the revenue is growing, but also the expense side is growing. We talked about doing some high visibility mowing or making some beautification efforts with TxDOT right away and interstate corridors. And then our center costs are increasing as well, up to almost $400,000 a year. So we have to add expenses there. HR would like to do some employee development type training. So there's 26,000 added for that. And then municipal court, we need to do some things differently there. So we need to contract for an associate judge. Actually, we need to contract our presiding judge as well. But currently we have an associate judge that we never really use, we rarely have used, not paid. And that puts our court in a bad situation for if something comes up with Judge Lee and he can't make it, then what? So we can't expose ourselves that way. So the thought is we need to have a contract with an associate judge to basically, the thought is like $1,000 a month. You got to pay an attorney or some sort of contingency. So he's there when we need him. All right. And that's what the contract's going to say. And so there's going to be some more costs in court, but we really have to do that. And that's what that is.
Mike.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
Stephanie. Two slides.
I'm hearing voices, didn't know from which
Thought
direction.
the voice was from above.
It's God.
Yeah, yeah. 2 slides back. I'm so sorry to go back, but the call center or the communications center, man, that's a massive jump.
Yes.
Any
Is
re-
anything
any
that you
reason
wanna
for
add on,
that?
Keith? Or
Any-
Sam?
I'm sorry. I just.
No, this is good.
That's horrible. Yeah, we see the butt. Where's the bang?
It was a kind of a double whammy. First part was call volume.
So we're actually charged based on our usage. So our call volume went up. And then the second part is their actual budget went up. They're struggling like everybody. There's a crisis in public safety on recruitment and retaining personnel. And so they struggle there. So they've done some changes and increases in their budget. So it was a combination of two things both at once, and that created that larger jump.
Operating budget is 50% Bell County and 50% the other 4 cities. Killeen, Parker Heights, Belton, and Temple.
We're
Based on
about,
call volume.
yes, and we're about 8%.
Based on call volume. correct.
About 8% of that is us.
Can any of those ARPA funds that are left over be used for that?
We could do that. It's obviously one-time type use. We could use it in 24. And that would be about the end of it. But sure, we could.
This could be. an
These are
ongoing
not going to be
increase.
going down. This is probably going to be a trend you'll continue to see.
Right.
What,
Okay.
so why, since you said it was 2 things, what has driven our call volume?
Population growth, just the type of calls we're running on, I mean, it's, we're busier than ever. We're seeing things. I mean, we used to never see, and it's here.
Yeah.
We're ninth largest metropolitan area in Texas now.
2 interstates.
Two interstates, county seat, the jails here, the courts are here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And everybody around us is starting to see that. I think we're seeing the Texas boom.
Density.
Yeah.
That's what caused.
It's true. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Dense individuals live close to each other. Think about that.
But it's truthfully density. You put a lot of people in a small area, you're gonna have more disturbance calls and more issues like that.
That's a Lions. I'm gonna write that one down.
Okay, so, thank you. So, on the other expenses category, this is all contributions that city council makes. This budget is increasing by 32,000. The one that is causing that increase primarily is Hill Country Transit. For the past 2 years, we have not paid anything to Hill Country Transit because they've had funding from other sources. ARPA, I think, was some of that money, or COVID money, things like that. So they've not asked agencies to contribute. We will have to contribute something in 24, and the past number that we've been budgeting is 30,000. One thing to note, however, is there is a request that you'll be seeing soon. We've had some initial conversation with folks from Hill Country Transit. They're looking at maybe $130,000, $132,000 from the city, and you'll hear all this later, but that's not for the same service that you're getting today. In fact, it's transformational,
It's very exciting.
completely different service that they would render.
Really transformational.
But you'll be hearing that. You'll be hearing that in an upcoming meeting. So capital outlay, we replaced the windows in this building last year. We're not going to do it in 24. So that's why capital outlay went down. And then the transfers that you see, that $1.1 million is based upon the budget as it sits today without the decision on what we want to do with that surplus. Debt service fund, we're going to go through quickly because there's not just a whole lot there. Revenues next year, 1.25 million. Expenditures, 1,205,000. Slight gain. Where this money comes from is property taxes.
Can you go back one?
Yes, sir.
I'm so proud to see $27,000 up there as the projected fund balance. That's a good number.
That's a good number.
I'm really serious.
Get it close to zero.
Yeah.
We aren't collecting any more than we need.
I understand.
Thank you.
So that money comes from property taxes. Again, it is what it is. 3.3% growth overall.
Wow.
Principal payments, you see are fairly flat there. Interest payments, 1.1 to 1.2, only $8,800. No point in spending too much time with that. This is the bonds. These are the bonds that we have outstanding. We owe $8.5 million. This is tax supported bonds, not total, for all city. This is paid with property taxes, and the number is like $8.5 million. This interest rate I wanted to show you, that is the coupon rate, right? That is stated interest rate. That's not the yield that the city paid. So the yields are actually a lot lower than this, but this is the rate that basically the bondholder gets paid. Here's the maturities of those, next maturities in 2025. So that causes our debt payments to look like this. We'll have this $1.2 million here for the several years. We'll have a slight drop after that when some of that rolls off in 28. Then it falls again in 2020, 31, and 2034. So here we go. Finishing up. Silver supplemental that we talked about before, where we thought was maybe a 58.5 cent rate, maybe closer to a no new revenue rate in the lower 50s. So that's a big thing. So you could do all of the stuff that we talked about and lower the tax rate potentially. Sales tax revenue growth is slowing down. I've mentioned that. Debt service still is $1.2 million. For 24, we look at adding 9 positions, which is making a big dent towards our strategic plan of putting people out on the street. 5% merit, 4.5% civil service is included. We still have $1 million included as street maintenance, annual street maintenance now. Looks like we'll be able to maintain that going forward, which is a great thing. So I need some information, some feedback from you. So as we go, as this is I'm hoping is kind of the greatest detail that we get into as we go forward. So I need your input as to what we put into 24 for some of these items. So first, that surplus that we talked about for 23, I guess this isn't, I need to get a feel for that. Really, this would be a 23 transfer, so it's not necessarily going to directly affect 24. Well, I guess it would because we're reducing our contributions in 24. So yes, I need an answer on this. Do you want to, what would you like to do kind of with that money? Equipment replacement transfer was one. Leave some or all of that in the general fund is certainly one. Use some or all of that for street maintenance is certainly one. Let's kind of get your feel for that.
Could you look at all of our decision points so that way we have it in framed and
That's a
okay.
great
All
point.
right.
Yes, I can
All
certainly
right.
do that.
I'm sorry.
No, that's, I was glad you asked because I didn't know how you want to do that.
Yeah, it would be good for us to kind of see the whole thing so we could figure out what we.
Great idea.
And the
Okay.
flexibility though, leaving that in the general fund sure opens up a lot of options down the road. I mean,
So the other,
allocate any percentage
absolutely.
At any time.
Other things that we need to think about. So again, please don't focus on a specific rate at this time. It's not 52.33 I'm talking about. But you know, are you still online for the silver supplemental package? Is one decision. What is council feeling on no new revenue rate? Is that, do you absolutely, is that a hard line? We really want no new revenue and don't go above, or would you be willing to maybe do a little more than no new revenue, like adding those firefighters for less than a penny? So those are really kind of the decision items that we're going to take from you and tweak this proposed budget that we're going to bring back to you soon.
Sam, when are we supposed to get the traffic study on Main Street?
We have the initial report. We've had one meeting with the consultant, but we're probably still 60 days, maybe 90 days out from final recommendations on suggestions of what to do. So it's a little bit out there. It's not quite
I don't know where that money will come from, but that's a huge need. I mean, we're gonna have to do something with Main Street. I get, David,
Yeah.
look forward to lots of complaints about Main Street.
Yeah.
Because I get them all the time and it just gets worse every day. And it's a great thing to have people come to downtown Belton, but they can't get down Main Street at the same
It'd be
time.
questionable whether we could actually do something within this fiscal year.
Right.
Study.
I'm just
coordination,
thinking
tech
ahead
stop,
that that's
design.
a big
tempo.
boulder out there that's not gonna
Right.
go away.
It's not gonna go away, but it might not be a fiscal year 24 expenditure. Other than maybe some detailed design that might help us get there.
Okay.
But that certainly could be a component of it in 24.
And that's something we could use some of the fiscal 23 surplus for, if that's back to the street maintenance type idea.
Yeah.
If you so desire.
Any other comments on these points? Well, y'all think I've got a couple of just observations. As I looked at expenditures, I noticed different items depending on how you split it went up or went down. Mostly went up in the kind of 9% range because that's kind of where we're going. It's kind of disappointing for me to see administration go up high as a percentage versus, let's say, streets or parks and some of the others that were flat or down, because that means that administration, as you go forward, becomes a bigger piece of the pie, which means the administration of what we're doing, we're actually taking bigger bite than the other. So I think that's a general observation that we need to make sure that, if this group, I mean, and sometimes we have to do public safety, sometimes we have to do some other things, but usually administration should go up at an average of, and it looked like it was on the high side.
What's pushing the administrative up much more than normal is that $97,000.
Well, that's where I thought it was. And that's
The rest of it's just
basically
merited.
2% of of personnel that's discretionary. So it's probably too high. And
Yeah.
you guys have mentioned that. So I think that's one, anyway, so that's one observation is I think that we want to have discretionary, especially if you've got one of your, everybody here's the best employee, right? But if you have one of your best employees that you need to retain, sometimes you need to discretionary, you need to go make a change and not have to go through, jump through a lot of things. So that's one observation. The other one, and John's pointed it out. Last year we brought in 1 point whatever extra. The year before that, we brought in whatever extra. The cost of the 2 firefighters for 1 cent is $160,000. I'll bet a silver penny that will be at least $160,000 over, and we'll bring in $160,000 in cash over our expenditures next year.
Right.
We will, because we're conservative. So I wouldn't say that we need to go up or down on our rate to do that. I think that's within noise level.
Make it work.
That I think that should just be part of the silver package.
Okay.
Whatever the rate is, I think that should just be, that's just my opinion. I mean, it's not like it's a 1.8 million.
Right.
Like, hey, let's buy the fire truck now in order to save a couple $100,000. So no, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, David. I was just gonna say, I think that's a really important need over a one
Yeah.
for us. You know, I think that that's a critical item to add in the manner that you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think as we go forward and tweak the numbers, yeah, you're right. That 150, we could make that.
You have so much flexibility. We could take, how much did hers grow by? 25-30%
Mhm.
over the previous year? And there was some discussion about taking 200,000 from TERS for street improvement. I think that makes a lot of sense now. TERS is big and generating a lot of revenue that really doesn't go to any police, fire, streets, or public service. That it may be time to identify some of those streets in the TERS and say, hey, they're going to do the streets. That frees up 200,000 for maintenance and operation.
There's a
Really
really
helps.
fleshed out plan for TERS.
Yeah, I think total project list over 20 years is like 80 something million or something. And most of it is streets, like to your point, is things that we don't have to. So your debt, if that continues to go, the debt would probably shift to TERS and out of this. And so that potentially would go to zero at some point in the future. All right. Any other comments? I know it's late, so comments go down based on that. If this was the first item, we would be talking it up.
I
It's
understand.
item 14.
Well, let's just leave it this way. Well, here, let's keep doing this too. Please feel free to send me suggestions, me individually, right? So we don't share it, that kind of thing. And then we can have that discussion as we go. So the calendar looks like this. June next meeting, we're going to have a very similar discussion than this on water and sewer. And then following that, we'll have our special revenue funds, internal service funds and EDC. July 11th is when I plan to bring you a proposed budget. But on the 24th, the week of the 24th is when we'll get the certified roll. So we are, because of the expedited calendar that we're trying to stay on. One thing that's different than in past years is the proposed budget that we'll bring will not have a certified value with it. I'll be real close. It's not going to be dramatically different. But that's okay, because then as we start to propose a rate later in August, we'll make the rate match what it needs to do or make adjustments to the budget as needed as based upon the rate that you're desiring. And then if we plan to adopt on the 21st of August, and then we've gone through a lot of this in
Any update on disabled veteran?
Doesn't look like it's going to happen.
It's not looking good at this point in time. There was a amendment made this week, and Hugh's position is that he's not comfortable with it because it is limited to just area counties. It's not statewide. All that mobilization statewide kind of goes away, and so the support for it statewide goes away. So if he's proposing a conference committee with the original bill, if that doesn't happen, he's going to be opposed to the bill in its current form. So that may not benefit us at all this time.
And just real quick, it's also not looking good for payday loans.
No, it's not.
And then it also thumbs down for maximum firefighter age, which
That's
was,
dead
we've
as
been
well.
fighting for.
That's
asking
dead
for,
as well. Right.
Since I got on.
It's not a lot of
Not very good.
No, there's no good news down there. So for consensus, I think for consensus, what the feel I'm getting now, we're probably going to have more conversation.
Right.
I think the feel is we probably support the no new revenue rate, going to that as close as possible, supporting all the silver things with the firefighters. And then as far as the 1.2, I don't know that we've got consensus that what we want to do. I think it's safe in the general fund. And if we want to buy down, instead of putting it all into the capital improvement, we just buy down 1 year's worth and put
Absolutely.
whatever 150 or 200 out of that,
That's-
to basically transfer it from general fund over and level it out. So it gives us some flexibility. So I think that's where we are. So from your budgeting, I think.
Yeah, we could always leave it just as it sits and then amend as we go when we later, even during 24, we could do that. So,
Recognize none of these are final decisions. If y'all have any other input, please share them with us, but we believe we're in really good shape with the budget, with the revenues coming in, and have a real opportunity to, remember, there was like 44 positions long-term that we needed citywide, and we're about a quarter of those.
Yeah.
9. So
Yeah.
really, very, very positive outcome here.
Well, thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone, for a long meeting. This council meeting is now adjourned at 12:15 a.m. tomorrow. No, not really. That was a kidding.
Where's this?
Boom, they're done.
I remember that one. I enjoyed the after hour, yes. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Good night.
Good one. Thanks for having us.
Now, some of that ARPA funding, we're gonna still see an increase in property.
Yeah.
It's gonna offset every year. It'll offset.
Yeah, but that's just one in the, I mean, up there and going in there.
Wayne, thanks for bearing with us.
Yeah.
And honoring you.